There is a pallet leaning against the dumpster behind a hardware store loading dock. Nobody looks at it twice. The forklift driver who set it there sees 100 of these a week. To him it is packaging, the thing that held someone else's order, now waiting for a truck to haul it off to a landfill. But behind a tool shed in Lancaster County, an Amish farmer sees something else entirely. He sees roughly 40 board feet of solid, kiln-dried lumber, already cut to length, already framed together, sitting free for the taking. And in the next half hour, with nothing more than a pry bar, a handsaw, and a fistful of screws he already owns, he will turn that pallet into something a garden center sells for $200. A raised garden bed kit at most home improvement stores runs anywhere from $150 to $300, depending on the wood. A store-bought compost bin, the kind with the little spinning drum, runs close to $100, sometimes more. A decent firewood rack, the kind that keeps your wood pile off the wet ground and out of the rain, costs $40 to $90, depending on the size. None of that is complicated engineering. It is boards, screws, and a frame. And the strange part is, the companies selling you the finished version have known for decades that the raw material for all three projects is already being thrown away outside almost every store in the country. You know the feeling. Spring comes, and you load lumber into a cart because you want a garden bed, and by the time you check out, you have spent more on wood than you will spend on seeds for the whole season. Or your kitchen scraps pile up because you do not have a tidy place to compost them, so you buy bagged soil instead, season after season, $10 a bag, year after year, never asking where all that organic matter is supposed to come from in the first place. Or your firewood sits on the ground over winter, soaking up moisture, and by January half of it will not catch, so you end up buying bundled wood at the gas station for $6 or $8 a bundle, burning through money just to stay warm in your own house. You pay for these things and assume that is simply the cost of living the way modern households live. Old farm households did not think that way because they could not afford to. In many Amish communities, the rule was never buy the tool that solves the problem. The rule was find the material that is already in front of you and understand it well enough to make it work. They did not have a machine to hide a bad design, and they did not have a credit card to paper over a wasted resource. If a board was sound, it got used. If a piece of wood had life left in it, somebody on the farm would find that life and put it to work. That habit was not about being clever. It was about paying attention to material other people had stopped looking at. Here is the first thing you need to understand, and it changes how you see every pallet you walk past for the rest of your life. Most people think pallet wood is junk lumber, leftover scrap not worth the trouble. That is wrong. The real situation is that pallets are often built from kiln-dried hardwood and softwood boards, cut to standard sizes, fastened with deck screws or ring-shank nails into a frame that has to survive forklifts, ocean freight, and being dropped from the back of a truck. Companies do not build flimsy pallets because a flimsy pallet means a ruined shipment. They overbuild them. That means the average pallet sitting behind a store is, board for board, stronger and better seasoned than a lot of lumber you would pay for at full retail price. Once you understand that, the old method makes perfect sense. You are not scavenging garbage. You are collecting pre-cut, pre-dried, over-engineered lumber that somebody else already paid to ship across the country. But not every pallet is equal. And this is the part most online tutorials skip past too quickly. Before you build anything, you need to know what you are looking at. Flip the pallet over and look at the small stamped block on one of the corner blocks. You are looking for the letters HT, which stands for heat treated. That means the wood was dried using heat rather than chemicals, and it is the kind you want for furniture, garden beds, or anything that will sit near food, or touch the soil you grow vegetables in. If you see the letters MB, walk away and find a different pallet. MB stands for methyl bromide, a fumigant some pallets were treated with in the past, and that is not something you want anywhere near your garden, your firewood pile, or the inside of your home. If a pallet has no stamp at all, treat it with caution rather than confidence because you cannot be sure what it touched or how it was treated. Also pass on any pallet that is painted, stained with a strong chemical smell, soft and crumbling from rot, or covered in mold. A sound pallet should feel solid when you press it, smell like plain wood, and show clean, dry boards with no soft spots. Once you have 2 or 3 good pallets, the next part is breaking them down without destroying half the wood. And this is where most beginners make their first costly mistake. Do not try to pry the board straight up with a crowbar from one end, because the nails will tear straight through the board and split it. Instead, use a flat pry bar or a reciprocating saw with a metal cutting blade slid underneath each board, between the board and the support block, and gently pop each board free along its full length, working both ends evenly. If you have access to a reciprocating saw, the fastest and cleanest method is to simply cut through the nails themselves, right at the joint, which leaves you with full, unsplit boards and saves your forearms a great deal of work. Wear gloves. Old pallet nails are often rusted, and a rusted nail through the hand is the kind of injury that needs more than a bandage and a shrug. If you are punctured by a rusty nail, clean the wound thoroughly and see a doctor, because tetanus is a real risk with old farm and shipping material, and this is not the place to be stubborn about it. Now you have a stack of clean, sturdy boards, and this is where the real project begins. The first build is the raised garden bed, and it is the project that pays you back the most, season after season, for the rest of your gardening life. You will need the boards from roughly 2 to 3 pallets, a box of 2.5-inch exterior screws, which will cost you about $6, and 4 corner stakes, which you can cut from the thicker pallet support blocks instead of buying separate lumber. Choose a flat, sunny spot in the yard, away from low areas where water pools after rain. Lay your longest boards down first to form the 2 long sides of a rectangle, a common size being about 4 feet by 8 feet, though you can size it to whatever boards you have. Screw the shorter end boards into the corners of the long boards to form a simple box. Then stack a second layer of boards on top, offsetting the corner joints the way a log cabin is built, so the box gains both height and strength. Drive a stake into the ground at each inside corner and screw the boards to the stakes, which keeps the whole bed from bowing outward once it is full of heavy, wet soil. Line the inside bottom edge with a strip of garden fabric if you want to slow weed growth from underneath, then fill it with a mix of soil and compost. A bed like this will easily last 5 to 8 years outdoors before any board needs replacing. And when one does fail, you replace a single board for free instead of buying an entirely new kit. The mistake that ruins this project almost every time is skipping the corner stakes. Without them, a full bed of wet soil will slowly push the walls apart over the first summer, and you will be doing the whole project twice. That is the first lesson, but the most important part of working with pallet wood is not the project itself. It is understanding that the same 3 or 4 boards can become 3 completely different solutions to 3 completely different household costs. And the second project takes the leftover boards from the same stack and solves a problem sitting right in your kitchen trash can. The second build is the compost bin, and it solves the problem most households never even think to question. Why do you keep paying for soil and fertilizer when your kitchen produces the raw material for both every single day, and you throw it in a bag for the truck to haul away? Take 4 pallets, ideally the same size, and stand them up on their edges to form a square, with 1 pallet on each side. Screw the corners together where they meet, using a few screws on each seam, just enough to hold the shape steady in the wind. Leave small gaps between the boards on at least 2 sides, since airflow is what keeps compost breaking down properly instead of turning into a wet, smelly mess. One side should be left loose or hinged with a couple of scrap hinges so you can swing it open and turn the pile with a pitchfork every few weeks. Place the bin on bare dirt, not on concrete or grass, so worms and soil organisms can move up into the pile and do the real work for you. Layer in kitchen scraps, dry leaves, grass clippings, and a bit of soil from the yard, turning it every couple of weeks. In 4 to 6 months, depending on your climate, the bottom of that pile will turn into dark, crumbling compost, the same material you have been paying $8 or $10 a bag for at the garden center. This will not replace every bag of soil you ever buy, and I want to be plain about that. A backyard compost bin is not a commercial fertilizer operation, and it will not produce enough material to fill a large garden overnight. But over a full year, a working bin like this can realistically replace dozens of bags of store-bought compost, which adds up to real money saved for the cost of a few screws and an afternoon of work. The mistake that kills this project is piling in too much wet material at once without any dry leaves or paper mixed in. A compost pile that is all wet kitchen scraps turns into a slimy smelling mess instead of rich soil. So always balance wet scraps with dry brown material like leaves or shredded cardboard. There is one more thing worth knowing before you move to the third project, and it is the part that makes people uncomfortable once they hear it. If this knowledge is this cheap, this old, and this practical, why does almost nobody talk about it? The honest answer is not some secret meeting in a boardroom. The honest answer is simpler and a little sadder than that. A bag of garden soil sold every spring is a recurring sale. A spinning plastic compost tumbler with a patented design is something a company can put a brand name on and advertise. A pallet sitting behind a grocery store, free for the asking, earns nobody a commission. Knowledge that saves you money instead of making someone else money does not get a marketing budget. And that is most of the reason it quietly disappears from one generation to the next, even though it never stopped working. The third build, the firewood rack, is the simplest of the three, and for households that heat with wood, it might be the one that saves the most money over a hard winter. Wet firewood does not burn well. It smokes, it smolders, and it wastes the energy in the wood fighting off moisture instead of giving you heat. Old farm households understood something simple that a lot of modern homeowners never learn. Firewood needs to be off the ground and open to air on at least 2 sides, or it will hold moisture from the soil and rain no matter how long it sits. Take 2 whole pallets, stand them upright and parallel to each other about 4 feet apart, and brace each one with a diagonal scrap board screwed from the ground to the top corner so they cannot tip in the wind. Lay a third pallet flat on the ground between them, raised on a couple of bricks or scrap blocks so it does not sit directly on wet dirt, and that becomes your base. Stack your split firewood between the 2 upright pallets, resting on the raised base pallet, and the open slats on every side let air move freely through the entire stack. A simple piece of scrap roofing tin or an old tarp laid over the top, angled slightly so water runs off, keeps rain and snow from soaking the top layer, while still letting air pass through the sides. Wood stacked this way dries faster, burns hotter, and produces less smoke and less buildup in your chimney, which matters for both heat and basic chimney safety. A rack like this, built from material that costs nothing, will outlast most of the plastic and metal racks sold at hardware stores. And unlike those racks, when a board eventually rots out near the ground after several winters, you simply unscrew it and replace it with another free pallet board, instead of throwing the whole rack away. I want to be honest about the limits of all 3 of these projects, because that is part of earning your trust and not just your attention. Pallet wood is not flawless lumber. It can have splinters, old nail holes, and occasional rough or warped boards that are better used for a less visible part of the project than for the top edge you will run your hand along. This is not a structural solution for anything that needs to hold serious weight, like a deck or a load-bearing wall, and it is not a substitute for a licensed contractor when a project touches your home's actual structure or electrical systems. Avoid pallets for any project that will be burned indoors in a stove or fireplace, since you can never be fully certain what a given pallet was exposed to during its working life. And burning unknown treated wood indoors is not a risk worth taking with your family's heir. Read whatever stamp is on the wood. Follow basic safety sense around old nails and splinters, and when in doubt about a piece of wood, set it aside rather than gamble with it. The lesson here is not that everything old is automatically better than everything new. Some old methods disappeared because newer ones genuinely worked better, and there is no shame in admitting that. But some old methods disappeared simply because they were too cheap and too simple to put a price tag on. And a pallet leaning against a dumpster is one of the clearest examples left standing in plain sight. When you start looking at that stack of boards not as trash, but as material your grandfather's generation would have hauled home without a second thought, something shifts in how you see your own yard, your own woodpile, and your own grocery bill. The past was not primitive. It was paying closer attention than we are used to paying now. And sometimes the wisdom was never lost at all. It was simply waiting behind a loading dock for somebody to look twice. In the next video, we are going to look at another old farmhouse habit hiding in plain sight, one that most modern homeowners walk past every single day without ever realizing it could be saving them money right now.